active. Why? Because we are shorter and clearer, and everybody, journal editors, style guides, are asking us to. Do we like nouns or verbs more? Verbs, because they're alive, they show life. Nouns are dead, and they make our sentences longer. Do we like strong verbs or weak verbs? Strong verbs, because shorter is always better if the meaning stays the same. Do we like to start our sentence with it? No. We want to start with our subject instead, right? Subject must, subject may. How about pronouns? Are they always our friend? They are not our friends, and we are suspicious of them. And wherever we can, we try to replace them, take them out of our sentences. My next error is the number one complaint of reviewers and editors, and that is deleting redundancy and extra words. Here's a comment from a reviewer. He says, the whole paper should be shorter. I am confident that you could say everything you need to in 30% less space. Ouch. 30% less space. This is very painful. When we have to go back and cut out 30% of our baby that we've been working on for 2 years, very painful. But we can avoid this comment if we take the time to cut out that redundancy before we submit our paper. Now, reviewers have a very special word they use when they talk about this problem. They call this problem dead wood. Dead wood. They say, there's a lot of dead wood in your paper. And what do they mean? Well, dead wood is actually a word that comes from biology, which is my own background. When I was in the university, I was in the biology department, and my responsibility was to care for the university apple trees. I had to walk up and down every day taking care of the apple trees. Now, what did I have to do? I had to look for dead wood on the apple trees. What is dead wood? We have our apple tree. It's growing, it's healthy, it's strong, and then it sends out a branch, but then the branch will die, but still stay connected to the tree. Now, this is a problem for the apple farmer because every year that branch is taking energy from the tree, but contributing no value to the tree. No leaves and no little red apples. So the apple farmer, what does he do? He needs to cut all the dead wood out of his tree so that the energy of the tree can go into producing big, beautiful apples. So the bigger the tree, the smaller the apple, and the more difficult to find it. The smaller the tree, the bigger and more beautiful the apple is. Now, reviewers also say this about our paper. They say, there's a lot of dead wood in your paper, and what do they mean? They mean that there are sentences and words and phrases that are not adding value, but are in fact taking the value away. And there's only two things that a word can do. It can either help you or hurt you, but it doesn't do nothing, right? So words that do nothing actually hurt us. They are the dead wood our reviewers don't like. And let me also mention, nobody likes long papers. Nobody. Journals don't like long papers that are filled with dead wood because they're more expensive to publish. Editors don't like long papers because he would rather have 2 new authors than 1 really long paper. And reviewers don't like long papers because it takes longer to read and review a long paper than a short paper. Basically, the more the dead wood, the more difficult to find that paper a home. So we try very hard to cut out all that dead wood in advance. Let's take a look at some examples of dead wood in the paper. And here's a sentence. It may be said that there are more than one explanation which would explain this result. Not fewer than one explanation which could explain this result. There are several possible explanations for this result. It may be said that, if you can say something, you don't need to say that you can say it, you can just say it, right? We can cut that right out, and there are several possible explanations. Here's another one. It is the systems analyst who makes a determination of the question as to whether the program should be implemented. Do we like to start sentences with it? No, not really. Remember we talked about that. We can cut that out and start with our subject, which is the systems analyst. The systems analyst, do we like pronouns? No. If we can cut them out, we happily do. The systems analyst makes a determination. That is a weak verb. What's the strong verb? Determines. Good. The systems analyst determines of the question as to. That's just garbage. We'll take that out. Whether to implement the program. The systems analyst determines whether to implement the program. Same meaning, but the dead would has been removed, and the value of this sentence is easier to understand, and I'm not wasting the journal space with extra unnecessary words. Here's another one. It may be said that systems have the ability to incorporate types of equipment in order that the user is in a position to interact with the system. Let's help this poor guy. It may be said that. Do we have to say that we can say something? No. Systems. There's my subject. Let me start with my subject. Systems have the ability to. If I have the ability to do something, I can do it. Good. Systems can incorporate equipment so that the user can interact with the system. Same meaning, but shorter and so much clearer and better. Now, sometimes students tell me, teacher, no. They say, you made a mistake here. You repeated the word can twice in a sentence. And they say, there's an English rule that says you cannot repeat the same word twice in a sentence. You know what? There's no rule like that. We can repeat the same word twice, mewanti, no problem. I've never seen a reviewer comment that said you repeated the same word twice. Never. I have many reviewer comments complaining about this problem. This problem will kill you. This is not a real problem. Repeating a good word twice in a sentence has never been a problem. We're okay. Now, sometimes students tell me, but teacher, this is more impressive, more high quality. Man is so low quality. But I like to tell them that we are not writing our papers to impress our reviewers with how many words we know. This is not our purpose. We are writing to express our research, not impress, express. And if a short word is clear, we use the short word. We don't use long words just because they're long. We would only use a longer word if it was clearer. And I will give you examples later of fuzzy words we don't like with clearer substitutes. However, can is just as clear as have the ability to, so we are happy to use that shorter word here. Let me review our two concerns as a technical writer. First, we want to be clear. Second, we want to be short. Short and clear. Clear and short. We come back to these over and over. And they're related. I just showed you sentences of long sentences, but when we made them shorter, they also became clearer, right? We saw that. So we know that when our sentence becomes shorter, it becomes clearer. But let me talk about the other direction. When you are clear with your word choice, you can also be shorter. Now, this is because English has many words. In fact, sometimes you look up a Chinese word in your English-Chinese dictionary, right? You type in one Chinese word, and there will be more than one English word with the same meaning as the Chinese word, right? There will be a short one, longer one, longer one, really long one. Unfortunately, students copy and paste the really long one because it's high quality. We don't do that. We pick the one that is clearer because each of those meanings, each of those words has a particular shade of meaning, a particular application, a very precise meaning. In fact, if you did not use that word, you would have to write one or two sentences explaining what that word can do by itself. Basically, there are one or two sentences inside of the word, if you understand what I'm saying. So as writers, we're very careful with our word choice because choosing the right word saves us a lot of extra sentences and a lot of extra writing. So we're very careful about choosing a clear word so we can also be shorter. Now, there's a wonderful book, wonderful tool that we use a lot as writers called a Thesaurus. You see that word right there? Thesaurus. Thesaurus is a type of dictionary that will give you, and you can look up the meaning of each word and then replace in your paper. We use it all the time in my class because it's such a great tool. You should become familiar with it too. It can help you to get those clearer words that you need to more precisely say what you're trying to say. Now, I'm going to do two things today. First, I'm going to show you examples of how we can be shorter by removing dead wood and replacing with single words. Then, I'm going to show you examples of fuzzy, general, double meaning words we hate because of their general fuzzy meaning, and better, precise, single meaning words we love because those words work harder for us and more clearly show what we are trying to say. I emphasize this a lot in my class. In fact, every week my students have to memorize 50 more vocabulary, academic vocabulary, because if we don't know those precise words, it's very difficult to write a good sentence. And if we don't have a good sentence, we don't have a good paper. It starts with those words. We need to get those. And so I'm going to just show you some examples today, and later on you're going to need to do more of your own study on this, but you'll get an idea of the type of thing that we are concerned about. Can we hit that space bar? Okay, here it is. The question as to better whether. No need to write a phrase when you can replace with a single word, especially when the single word has precisely the same meaning. Reach a conclusion is a weak verb. Better conclude. No difference in meaning, but yet shorter. Put an end to. Better end. Provided that. Better if. One of my students came to me, he said, "Teacher, I don't like the word if." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Only 2 letters is low quality." He said, "Provided that is higher quality." And I told him, "Stop worrying about the quality, worry about the meaning. Provided has several meanings. If has one meaning, it's actually a clearer word. Just because a word is short doesn't mean it's bad. Sometimes the short word is actually better than the longer word, clearer than the longer word." Prior to, before. We prefer one word over 2 whenever we have a choice. Subsequent to, after. In view of the fact that, my student was so proud of this, but he just means because. Now, I should mention to you, I have because and since here, but you are in medicine. And AMA has a new rule now that they don't want you to use since to mean because. The reason is, since has a double meaning for time and cause. And there are times, for example, let me give you a sentence. He wanted to be a doctor since he was 6 years old. You don't know if it's because he's 6 years old or since the time when he was 6 years old. You see the double meaning there. And AMA gives many other examples when since is a very bad word when we mean because. So, good rule is only use since for time and only use because for cause. Particularly in medicine, because AMA made a big deal about this. In large measure, largely. Is in excess of, exceeds, surpasses. In case. Case is also a word I try to cut out of students' papers. Unless we're talking about a medical case, because case has many meanings. Law case, suit case, medical case, in case, which means if, in no case, which means never, in all cases, which means always, in this case, which means here. You see how many, the more you can use the word, the more you hate the word, because we become less clear. We force our reader to guess which case we are referring to. So, in case if would be clearer and shorter here. After the conclusion of, after. Notwithstanding the fact that, although. Manner in which, how. It is possible that, may, might, any conditional word. Is found to be. I see this a lot. But you know, if I find that this is a classroom and I find that this is Monday, this is a classroom, this is Monday. Who cares about my finding? It doesn't make any difference to the meaning of the sentence. If this is what you found, that's what it is. Is capable of, can. In this case, here's my case problem here. In some cases, occasionally. In no case, never. In all cases, always. Now, case has many meanings, but always means always. So again, not only is it shorter, but it's also clearer here. In most cases, generally. Don't say usually. I'll tell you why we don't like usually a little bit later, but it's a general, multiple application word. Generally is much more precise in this context. In many cases, often. In close proximity to, near. In a number of, several, or many. Not only is it shorter, but they're both clearer. I'm talking about fewer or more, depending on the word that I use here. If conditions are such that, if happens to be, if it happens to be Monday, it is Monday. No one cares about the happening either. Give indication of, indicate. For this reason, because. I'm changing this one here. Since is for time. For the reason that, so that. For the purpose of, for or to. During the time that we are here is while we are here. You can begin to see how we can cut 30% of our paper, right? You can begin to see why the editor and reviewer would make this comment about deadwood. We take all this out, our paper gets significantly shorter without changing our meaning, and in fact, it becomes clearer. Due to the fact that, because. Despite the fact that, although. So come to a conclusion, conclude. And again, I'm going through them quickly, but if you like the PowerPoint, again, just give me your email, I'll send it to you. You can review these more slowly later if you'd like. By means of, by. Be deficient of, lack. Can we hit the space bar there? Seldom for time, negligibly for volume. Problem. Where did the problem come from? I want more detail about this. Obstacle. This is a problem I can overcome. I know I can. It's a problem that I think I can beat. Limitation. It's a problem from not enough of something, not enough time, not enough money. Restriction. Government, rule, policy will stop me from doing this. Shortcoming, not enough motivation. Drawback, disadvantage. Phenomenon, unexpected problem. We have others. Hindrance, a problem that slows me down but doesn't stop me. Way, many meanings, highway, freeway, or the way you solved your problem. This is also a Chinese telephone greeting. Way. Better, method, means, approach. This is the way you solve your problem. Figure out. Figure has a double meaning. It can mean number, right? We don't like that. Also, even the term figure out is very fuzzy. Better to state distinguish if you mean the small differences, emphasizing small differences between two things. They're hard to determine the difference. Differentiate, to emphasize the large differences and how they are different. Discriminate, to see the difference between one and the other ones in a negative way, to show how it's not as good. Identify, to know its name, you see. All of these could mean figure out, so we see how useless figure out is. Suitable, better, appropriate, matching the situation, or adequate, enough for the situation. Just right on it. Tries, how hard did you try? Attempt, aim, aspire. You can use this for your effort or for another scholar's effort in your study. Usually. This is again a general word. It would be better to say normally, typically, or generally. Let me give you examples of when you would do this. Normally is when you're talking about something that happens in time. Every day, I normally wake up at 6 o'clock. It has the same meaning as regularly. When we're talking about predictable events by time, we say normally. Typically is when we're talking about cases that are not bound by time. Typhoons typically hit Taiwan in the summer. We don't know when the typhoon will come, but when a typhoon does come, we can say what typically happens when the typhoon does come. I was in Keelung for the last 2 days in National Ocean University for Saturday and Sunday. I was doing a workshop. Wow! Crazy rain! Amazing! I thought I would need a boat to go to class. Those Keelung people are so tough. I couldn't believe it. You know, there's water all over the campus, right? I have to take off my shoes to walk to the classroom, and everybody is there. I'm so impressed. Those researchers go, nothing stops. Stones on the road, mudslide. We continue teaching English. You know, it's amazing. Keelung people, so tough, so powerful. Wow. Raining. I've never seen so much rain. It's just water everywhere. Anyway, generally is when we're talking about populations or groups. Most people think that. People generally think that. Larger group, majority, we can say generally. So, normally for events that happen on time, typically for events that happen not on time, and generally for groups or populations. Very. Fuzzy word. If I could take one word out of English, this would be my first choice, because my students always say, it is very, very, very important. And I tell them, we have words for how very and how important something is. We would not be content with those general words. Let me give an example here. Highly, rather, quite. Let's go back one slide. Highly, rather, quite, extremely. Thank you so much for your question and your compliment too. Appreciate that. The editing method that we use, I designed after teaching this writing course to PhD students for about 11 years. And what I ask editors to do is what we call an educational ed. That is, they will write a lot of comments in the margin of the paper to the author about why they are changing what they are changing. And in instances where they don't know, I don't want them to change the meaning. So I will ask them to change it and then to put a comment to the author. Please check this because I'm really not sure. There are some other alternatives. And it's common that we don't only edit one time. After the client looks through my questions and answers, he'll send it back and we will review again, no charge for that, to make sure that what he has changed is understandable now. So we sometimes have to play ping pong with the paper a couple times back and forth, just to go through some of those rough areas that you mentioned, because there will always be situations like that where we just don't know exactly what the author is trying to say. And we hope that we can solve those problems before it goes to the reviewer or the editor of the journal. But one thing an author could do is pay particular attention to word choice. A lot of the corrections we make are related to word choice, but sometimes we don't know, because he'll use a very general word, like find, and there are different kinds of finding, as we have said. So sometimes we will have to write in, do you mean this, or this, or this, or this, and then choose one of those words, because we don't know exactly what he's trying to do. And so we can only suggest, but we can't directly replace some of the terms that we're not so sure about. So that is a challenge. But if the author would take more time with the Thesaurus and go through and was more discerning with the vocabulary, it would make the editor's job simpler, for sure. Also, more active voice and less passive voice, because we change that a lot in papers, as particularly outside of the method section, where we still do prefer the passive voice, because, as you said, it is more humble in the method section to use the passive. But beyond the method section, it just becomes redundant or longer or more unclear, and the editor doesn't appreciate it as much outside of that method section.
Yeah, just raise another question. We know there's American journal and British journal. Are they different? That sometimes we start with the reference author stamp, and then Smith said, or just we don't mention the name, or just put a number of the reference at the end of the sentence. So are they any different that when we prepare, we need to pay attention to this?
Thank you. It's a great question too. He's asking about the citation style, how we cite our sources in our reference section. And there is different ways to cite. There's the Harvard style and Vancouver style and AMA, particularly in medicine. Those are the three that we use. And they do differ in the way that they use the numbers, either in text or at the beginning. But that's not really a difference between US and UK. Usually the journal will specify one of those three style guides. And if the author will request it, our editors will follow that style guide carefully and change it to match whatever the journal asks. In fact, on our upload page, we ask the author to specify which style guide they would like us to use. I believe that they're all US style guides though. The big difference between UK and US journals are UK English and US English. And it's primarily an issue of spelling. The UK, I don't know, they have the very proper, high-class English in there. I noticed that the American editors kind of are okay with UK English, but UK editors always care that you follow the correct UK style. Especially like the word analyzed. UK will do that with an S, and we low-quality Americans use Z. Labeling, they use two L's, we use single L. Hematoma, they have H-A-E, and we use H-E. So there are some, usually UK just has more letters. How can you solve this? It's very simple, let me tell you. You go to Microsoft Spell Check, and you just pick UK English instead of US. They will underline everything, you can switch it in 5 minutes. It takes no time at all to do that. Or if you have us edit it and you specify UK English, we'll change that for you too. We're able to do that. But beyond spelling, there's not really any grammatical difference between the two languages. It's just those words that usually UK will have a few more letters, that's it, than the US. Any other questions?
Yes. Eric? Steve, I think you have done an excellent job, and actually, you are not only a very good in teaching how to write, and also you are a very good presenter.
Thank you.
And I was picking up some presenting skills from you too. Well, I have a question for you. Is regarding the title of your paper. Since some of the authors they love to use the results of their paper as the title. And some of them, they don't use it, they only use a general term as a title of the paper. So my question would be, do you think that is appropriate to use the result as a title? If that is, so should we use present tense or use add something like imply that you say, or to indicate something?
Excellent question, thank you. And you know, you reminded me of, I just was working with my student 3 weeks ago on his title, and this was exactly his question. His original title, I'll just use that as an example. His original title was Mouse Behavior. And I told him, that's not clear enough for a title. You know, I need to know a specific behavior, and I need a modifying agent for the behavior, and ideally, we will put the results in the title too, so that my reader will catch the full impact of my whole research only by reading my title. So he brought me back his second title. His second title was The Effects of Estrogen on Nose Twitch Courtship Behavior in Mice. That was his full title. And it was good because we have a modifying agent now, estrogen, and then we have a specific behavior, nose twitch courtship behavior. But I said, let's try to get the results in, because that's always our ideal. And he said, how can we do that? The answer is we look for a verb. A good verb that shows the action that the results show. And sometimes we will write 20 different titles before we choose one, but it's worth the time because if the title isn't good, no one will even start with the abstract. And many lazy PhD students, you know, they never read your paper at all. They only read your title. So we're extremely concerned the title work hard so the impact of our paper will be better. So his third title was this: Estrogen stimulates intensity of nose twitch courtship behavior in mice. And that was a good title, I thought, because here we're putting our verb in the title too. The action stimulates intensity. And as a reader, I can catch the full impact of the article just by reading that title alone. So try to find a verb. The first one, affects. That's not a very good verb, because I want to know how it affects. And his second verb, stimulates intensity, is a lot clearer because it's letting me know precisely the effect that he's talking about. So if it is possible to find a verb that represents the results and put it into your title, good. However, it's not always possible. I'll be honest. There are times when the results are way too complicated and we just can't do that. So at least we will try to get the group that we studied and what action we took in our title and our key argument. At least those three things. Ideally the results, but not always possible. But always ideal if we can. So that would be what I would do there. I would try to put the results in if I could easily using a verb.
Sentence. Shall we break down or shall we make even we can express our meaning for this kind of compound complex sentence?
Great question, thank you. And it's difficult to give a general rule about that because there are times when we do need to use compound and complex sentences, but I generally shorten more sentences than I lengthen, definitely, in papers. And I tell students to use the one-breath test. That is, breathe and read the sentence out loud. If you run out of breath before the end of the sentence, it's too long. And that seems to be a good, quick rule to use when determining sentence length. We must be able to read within one breath. If you have to breathe and continue, too long. Cut it down so that you can at least do it in a single breath. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I think really appreciate your excellent lectures. So we might proceed to have more paper revised by your company.
We would be delighted to help. And you know, we have a guarantee. If you get any comment about poor English from editor or reviewer, doesn't matter the reason, we do the whole thing again for free with a new editor. We take it very, very seriously. We take great pride in the work that we do, and we stand by that guarantee. Sometimes reviewers will see, papers from Taiwan, or the editor will, and automatically recommend revision. It doesn't matter the reason. We do it all again. We assume there must be a problem, and as a result, several journals work with us now and only suggest their authors to use our service, and I'm quite proud of that, in fact. We've tried quite hard, and we'd be happy to have more papers from you.
Yes, so we have been using your editing for in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
Yeah, so hopefully more people will using their editing, and they provide a very good English editing. And most of the time, the reviewer won't say your English need more editing after your revision. So thank you again for your excellent lecture. Thanks.
Thank you.
Over the last 10 years. So you have a very good experience in English editing. The things impressed me each time when I submit my paper to his, for his revision. You almost can see they spend quite a lot of time to change every sentence you write down and always make better. So they are welcome at the Wallace.
Thank you today to talk about a topic that is very close to my own heart, and that is how can we get our papers published easier by avoiding the writing errors that editors and reviewers commonly use to reject our research. This is a topic that I've been working on here in Taiwan for it's been 11 years now. Every week I have a class during the semester for PhD students in Jiaoda and Qingda and also Taida Medical School. I also have writing laboratories where I work with students from those universities to prepare their research to publish. They have a lot of pressure to publish. If they don't publish soon, they die young. We have a lot of motivation to prepare our work just as well as we can so that our editors and reviewers will appreciate our contribution and our research. Let's see here. can move the cup away from the sensor there. You see the cup between the sensor? The mug. Yeah. Let's try that. Can you just push the space bar? Now, what causes rejection of Taiwanese journal papers? We had the editor from the Journal of Retailing visit Jiaoda about 5 years ago and do a presentation. I invited this editor to my class to talk to my students about writing and publishing. And I asked him a question. I said, "Sir, I know many people tried to submit to your journal and you always kill us quickly. Often because of English when we submit the papers from Taiwan. Can you please tell me why you do this?" He was a nice guy, so I could be very direct with him. And he said, "Steve, when I receive a paper from Taiwan, I read the title and I get excited. I think that's a good topic. Wow. But then I start reading through the abstract, and in the first sentence I see an English error, and my heart goes, ah. And I see another one, oh. And another one, He said, "Steve, it becomes so painful, because I think if the author doesn't care about English, which is easy to see, what about other problems in his paper that are not easy to see? Is he also careless with his method? Is he also careless with his literature review? I begin to doubt everything, and it's more efficient to reject it." Ooh. More efficient to reject it. You see, people judge the quality of your research by the language you use to present the research. I know it's not fair, but because English is so easy to measure, everyone will measure it, unfortunately. So we must be very careful to present our work in such a way that our English does not cut the impact of the research, of our results. Let me share with you the result of a study I did over 5 years. Over 175 rejected papers from Jiaoda and Tsinghua. These were from my courses. Now, the domain is not similar. This is from mechanical and electrical engineering domain. However, your errors are the same. What reasons did editors and reviewers use for rejecting our papers? 7% faulty methodology. There was a problem with the statistics, with the formula, with the numbers, reject. 4% inadequate references, not enough citations, reject. 9% poor quality supporting figures. I don't understand the figure, the graph is confusing to me, it's fuzzy, or the caption isn't telling enough to understand what's going on. 7% outside the scope of the journal. It's a good topic, but it's bad for us. Goodbye. 8% not enough contribution to field. It's not important enough. 13% authors did not follow the manuscript instructions. So, you know, I'm not going to talk about this a lot today, but let me just tell you that the editor on his website, it looked like a proposal. 16% passive voice errors. I'm going to show you some detail and explain this in a minute. 13% weak verbs. 7% verb agreement. 4% omitting comparisons. 4% clear pronouns. 11% in and there. 15% noun-verb issues. I'm going to go through and give you examples of each of these today in our 2 hours this morning. Let me start. Let's change the slide. With the passive voice. In English, we can write a sentence in 2 ways. Actively or passively. Now, in an active sentence, the subject of the sentence will do the action. Let me give you an example. Here's an active sentence. The man, subject, hit the ball, object. The man, he's doing the action, he's hitting the ball. But we could write this same sentence passively. The ball was hit by the man. You notice we often have the word by in a passive sentence, don't we? Now, in medical writing today, reviewers, editors, journals, style guides, they all say the same thing. What do they say? They say, prefer the active voice. Avoid the passive voice. Or use the passive voice seldom or sparingly. And yet over and over again, students will write 80, 90% of their sentences in passive, which makes this a very common complaint. So this morning, first thing, I want to talk about when you can use active voice, but I'm going to start by giving you some examples from the journals in your domain about when to use active voice. Let's start with AMA, the American Medical Association Style Guide. They say this: in general, authors should use the active voice, except in instances in which the author is unknown or the interest focuses on what is acted upon. What does AMA say? They say, first, prefer active voice, except when? Except when you have no subject. The ball was hit. I don't know who hit the ball. Passive voice is fine here. Or when the interest focuses on what is acted upon. When we don't care about the subject of the sentence. Now, when do we not care about the subject of our sentence? Well, in current academic writing today, we don't care about the subject of the sentence if you are the subject of your sentence. Especially in the method section. If I write my method section in active voice, every sentence will begin with we, right? We did this, and we did that, and we did something else. And sometimes the reviewer will say, the author sounds egocentric. We don't want to appear egocentric, so usually the method section we will write in passive voice, because also people know that it's me in my own method section. I don't have to remind them every sentence that I'm the one doing it. So passive is fine here. You can still say we. Where? In your discussion section. In your discussion section, you are now separating yourself from your work and talking about what you think it means. And we is fine here. We could say, we believe, or in our opinion, in your discussion. No reviewer will complain about that. And some journals even allow you to say we in your method section, which is changing. And what's interesting is the history of active and passive voice. When you look back to 1860, Charles Darwin wrote his book on the origin of species. In Charles Darwin's time, scientists would write in the first person, I, an active voice. I observed. Very easy to read. Starting in the 1920s, scientists began to think that if we put the people into our research, it is less scientific, more subjective. So starting in the 1920s, we see all passive voice, and no I and no we. Starting in 1953, with Watson and Crick's paper on DNA, they helped to change the conventions for medical writing in particular. And I'm going to give you the example of their first sentences in a moment. But Watson and Crick used we throughout their paper, which was amazing for their time, and today, medicine still allows more we than every other domain, probably because of that reason. But this is still changing. As I said, discussion section, every journal will let you use we. It's the methods that's tricky. So my advice is use the passive in the method section, write your discussion using we, that will be fine. Throughout the rest of your paper, we will also still prefer active voice. Let's talk about the introduction. In the introduction, we are talking about what we are going to do. And we don't want to say we in our introduction, so we can often use the research, the paper, the investigation as the subject of our sentence. This research proposes. We can let that do the dirty work. This research presents rather than we in the introduction if you are concerned about that. But let me mention another quick rule. AMA recently has a new rule that they don't want the study doing the human activities. They say a study can't analyze, only human can analyze. A study can't argue, only human can argue. So I know this is a bit mafan. A study can present, a study can show, a study can propose, but a study cannot argue or discuss because these are the human activities. So how do we do this? We have to say, this study presents a discussion. I know it's a bit tricky, but it can present, but it can't directly discuss. That's how we will get around that problem in the introduction of our paper. Let me take a look at the Journal of Trauma and Disassociation. They say, use the active voice whenever possible. We will ask authors that rely heavily on use of the passive voice to rewrite manuscripts in the active voice. Ophthalmology, Active voice is much preferred to passive voice, which should be used sparingly, seldom. They continue, passive voice does not relieve the author of direct responsibility for observations. This is a problem. Sometimes students will say, it was observed, rather than saying we observed. AMA doesn't like that, or this journal doesn't like that. They want to know if you observed it, you have to take the responsibility by saying we. Journal of Neuroscience says, overuse of the passive voice is a common problem in writing. Although the passive has its place, for example, in the method section. Didn't we just talk about that? We said methods will be passive, and this journal also encourages us to do that as well. British Medical Journal. Some believe that the UK has a different style in relation to active-passive voice, but that is not true. UK also prefers active voice. Please write in a clear, direct, and active style. Write in the active voice and use the first person where necessary. First person is we. Where can we put we in our paper? Discussion section. APA, those of you in social science or nursing, says prefer the active voice. Science says use active voice when suitable. Behavioral ecology says active voice is preferable to impersonal passive voice. Science also says the same thing. They prefer the active rather than the passive voice. But let me show you an exception here. Let me show you Watson and Crick's paper on DNA. Watson and Crick begin their abstract using we, which was a big deal in 1953. They say, we wish to suggest a structure for the salt of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. Notice that it's very clear, very simple to understand, very easy for the readers to catch. If they use passive voice, they would have to say, in this paper, a structure is suggested for the salt of deoxyribonucleic. It's longer and more complicated. Thus, they're clearer and shorter by beginning with we. Now, let's talk about when we should use the passive voice. First, let me change the... You can use the passive voice if the performer is unknown, irrelevant, or obvious. And I have an example of each of these for you. I'm not saying you can never use passive voice. I'm saying use it rarely and carefully. You can use it here. If it's unknown, my first sentence, up to 90% of the energy in light bulbs is wasted in the form of heat. It would be difficult for me to say who is wasting the heat, isn't it? I mean, I could probably say it, but it would be very awkward to say who is wasting the heat. It's unknown. Thus, passive voice will be very helpful here. Or my second sentence, the performer is irrelevant, or we don't care. The first edition of Freud's earliest writings on dreams was published in 1899. The publisher published it. I don't care about the name of the publisher either, so passive would also be fine here. Or third, I would use passive voice if the subject is obvious. Madagascar has been one of the most extensively studied species in genetics research. Who is doing the action? Researchers. But I don't need to say researchers have researched. That's redundant and obvious. So, in these three situations, you can see, number one, I don't know my subject. Number two, I don't care. And number three, everybody knows. In these situations, passive is fine. A second situation when I can use passive voice is in my methods section. And I talked about this briefly, but let me give you some examples. Here's a sentence from one of my students' method sections. He says, the honeybees were kept in a humidified chamber at room temperature overnight. This is passive. If I made it active, I would say, we kept the honeybees in a humidified temperature. The meaning is the same, and I just add we. It puts unnecessary emphasis on me as the researcher, which I don't want in my method section. So passive is fine here. Or my second sentence. The solution was heated to 90 degrees. If I didn't say that, I would have to say, we heated the solution. Again, I don't like this overemphasis on myself, so I would prefer passive in my method section. The third situation when you can use the passive voice is when you want to connect two sentences together. Now, this is an advanced use, and it's not necessary that you use it this way. In fact, if you don't feel comfortable with it, you can just use active voice, that's fine. But let me tell you the third situation when you might want to use the passive voice. I'll give you two examples. The first one, green plants produce carbohydrates in the presence of light and chlorophyll. Now, if you are emphasizing green plants as the subject of your paragraph or your key point, this is good. However, maybe you want to emphasize carbohydrates. Maybe that's your key point. In this situation, you should begin with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are produced by green plants. Perhaps the previous sentence was about carbohydrates, and I want to connect to that previous sentence. This sentence would also be appropriate here. Let me give you an example of Watson and Crick, how they skillfully used both active and passive voice in their paper on DNA. Their first sentence, we wish to identify a structure for the salt of DNA. This is active sentence. The next sentence is also active. This structure has novel features, which are of considerable biological interest. But notice the third sentence, passive. A structure for nucleic acid has already been proposed by Pauling and Corey. Now, why did Watson and Crick use a passive sentence in the third sentence of their paper? Because they're trying to connect a structure in sentence 3 to this structure in sentence 2. If they didn't do that, they would have to say Pauling and Corey had already proposed a structure for, it puts the structure far away from the previous sentence, from the structure that we just introduced. So in this case, we are trying to keep our ideas close together. We are connecting the object from the third sentence to the subject of the second sentence. Thus, passive voice can help us here. Now, this is not a common use, and we should prefer the active voice, as I showed you in my previous slides. However, in the three situations that I mentioned, where the subject is obvious, irrelevant, or unknown, or in our methods, or when we're connecting two sentences together, passive can still be used, but that's a minority of our sentences. Let me give you a sentence in the passive and talk about how to change it to active to get you used to this exercise. Here's a sentence. Identification of poor food, bad housing, inadequate hygiene, and large families as the major causes of poverty was made by Jones. The first thing we need to do in a passive sentence is to find our subject. Who's our subject in this sentence? Jones, that's right. Now, a good way to find your subject is to find the word by, because your subject usually comes after by in a passive sentence. Then we need to move our subject to the beginning of the sentence so he can do the action. Jones identified poor food. Quick note, in medicine, the verb of report for single study is always past tense. Not identifies, not have identified, it's identified. Completed action, simple past tense. Consideration of whether countries work well on cross-border issues, such as immigration, is undertaken by Raoul. Who's my subject? Raoul, right? And what did he do? He considered whether. Modification of the model was made by Johnson to reduce color breakup. Who's my subject? Johnson. And what did he do? He modified the model. Notice here that in a passive sentence, we can put our subject anywhere. We can put the subject here, 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 here. There is no consistent place for the subject. So in a long passive subject, I often have to read it 2 times. First to find the subject, and second to decode what the subject did. But when we use the active voice, we always know, Johnson, he modified the model. We are clearer. And we actually have only 2 main goals in medical writing. Number 1, we want to be clear. We never want people to guess our meaning. And number 2, we want to be short. Shorter is always better if the meaning stays the same. Clear and short. Short and clear. In fact, all of these errors are related to breaking one or both of those rules. And this makes writing for medicine different from writing a novel, you'll notice. Other kinds of writing, for example, novel writing, I can use a long, beautiful passive sentence to give my reader a feeling. And my reader is enjoying his feelings, so he's enjoying reading my sentence. However, when someone is reading my medical paper, they are not enjoying themselves. They just want to get my key points so they can go home. So thus, my purpose is very different when I'm writing my research than when I'm writing a novel. I want to be short and clear. Clear and short always comes back to those two principles. And that's why we prefer active voice, because you notice active voice is clearer and shorter than passive voice, fulfilling both of our goals as medical writers. Let me move on to a new error. We just said we prefer active instead of passive voice. We also prefer verbs instead of nouns. Whenever we have a choice between using a noun and a verb, we always choose the verb because we know our sentence will be shorter and clearer. Nouns are dead. They're stones in your sentence. Verbs are alive. They show flow and life. However, in my writing lab, some of my students love their nouns too much. Sometimes they love nouns so much that they have no verb at all. Just noun, 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 period. And I ask, what happened? Of course, nothing happened. That's our problem. And they will say, I know, teacher, I can solve this problem. I will use a garbage verb. What is a garbage verb? A garbage verb is a word that has no meaning except to show an action, except to say it happened. Now, I know it happened, but I want to be clear, so I want to know how it happened. So I'm not happy with garbage verbs. What are the garbage verbs? Occurred, undertaken, made, done, achieved. I want to know how it was achieved, how it was made, how it was undertaken, how it occurred. And that garbage verb is not telling me how. I must find my real verb inside of a noun. When I change that noun into a verb, I no longer need the garbage verb, and my sentence will be shorter and clearer. Here is an editor complaining about this problem in a paper. He says, it seems that many of your errors come from your using nouns instead of verbs. This makes your sentences longer because you need additional meaningless verbs. I call them garbage verbs, but we're talking about the same thing to complete them. Here's a sentence. Improvement of the system is achieved by variation of the control frequencies. Where's my subject? It comes after by, right? So this is a passive sentence right here. I know I should begin my sentence with this. Is there a noun in this sentence that can be changed into a verb? Improvement and variation can be varying. When I change my nouns into verbs, I can get rid of my garbage verb, achieved, making my sentence shorter and clearer. Varying the control frequencies improves the system. Doesn't that feel good? That's just wonderful, isn't it? It's moving, it's alive, it's shorter, it's clearer. My editor smiles. Here's another one. Enumeration of 3 reasons why the English language has become so important was made by Thompson. Where's my garbage verb? Made. I want to know how it was made, don't I? That's not telling me very much. What's my subject? Thompson. Better, Thompson enumerated. That means to count, by the way. Enumerated 3 reasons why the English language has become so important. A slight increase occurred in the performance rate. Where's my garbage verb? Occurred. Right now, this is a passive sentence. My subject is the performance rate. The performance rate slightly increased. My adjective becomes an adverb. My noun becomes a verb. My garbage verb is out. And we have a shorter, clearer sentence. Discussion of the challenges and strategies for facilitation and promotion of ERP is performed by Smith. Here's the other problem with nouns. When you have a lot of nouns, you need a lot of prepositions, of, on, by, in, through, and it slows us down, and we have to think what is on, what is by, what is through, what. It becomes very difficult. But when we use our active voice, this problem goes away. Smith discussed the challenges and strategies for facilitating and promoting ERP. I don't need those prepositions. I don't need those nouns because the verbs are doing their job. I also don't need the garbage verb performed because, again, I have my real verbs doing the job instead. We just said we love verbs, but we have two types of verbs. Strong verbs and weak verbs. A strong verb is one word that can show an action by himself. And a weak verb needs his friends to help him to show the same action. More than one word to show the action. Strong verb, consider. Weak verb, give consideration to. Strong verb, indicate. Weak verb, give indication of. Remember our rule that shorter is always better if the meaning stays the same. We don't want to use 3 or 4 words if one can do the job. Here's a reviewer complaining about this. He says, another suggestion for your paper is to find a native editor to help you with your verb use. Strong verbs move sentences, and helping verbs often confuse the reader in your technical descriptions. Now, helping verb and weak verb is the same thing. It will help to get the same action. Let me show you a sentence. Smith asked the question as to, that's 5 words, whether conventional methods provide the best environment for execution. Can you think of one word that has the same meaning as those 5 words? Question or ask. 都可以. Now, Smith questioned whether conventional methods, shorter, clearer, better. This article made a comparison, better, this article compared. This paper is not a medical paper. This is a paper from engineering. In engineering, the article can compare, but I told you about AMA's new rule, right? Articles cannot do human activities. This, in medicine, we would have to say, made a comparison, or present a comparison, I think would be better. Raoul made use of, better, Raoul used. We just said that we want to be short and we want to be clear. This means we don't want to start our sentence with fuzzy words that are easy to misunderstand, such as it. A lot of times I see students start their sentence like this. It is necessary that. It is imperative that. It is vital that. It is critical that. It is crucial that. Garbage, garbage, garbage. It is not the subject of our sentence. We hope to begin with the subject, and when they begin with it, frequently I have no idea what the subject is and what is necessary. Better to avoid beginning our sentence with a pronoun like it, which could be easily misinterpreted, and instead begin with the subject. Let me give you an example of how we could do that. Here's a sentence. It is vital that quantitative measures usefully supplement and extend qualitative analysis. Now, my subject in this sentence is quantitative measures, and I would much prefer to start my sentence with that rather than it. But I need to replace it is vital that with one word that has the same meaning, that will connect my subject to the rest of the sentence. Now, let's talk about the word vital. What does vital mean? Necessary for life, right? Your vital signs in medicine are your heart and your breathing, and when these stop, you must have them. So, we could say quantitative measures must usefully supplement and extend qualitative analysis. Same meaning, but shorter, and we avoid the ugly pronoun in the beginning of our sentence. Now, let's pretend this sentence was a little bit different. What if the sentence was, it is possible that. Can I say must now? No. what can I say? May, might. I could use a conditional word there to give the same meaning. Here's another one. It is necessary that the best method to adopt for this investigation is to be determined by the committee. What's my subject here? The committee. You see the word by? The committee is my subject. I want to move that in the place of it. That's what I'm talking about here. The committee, necessary. The committee must decide the best method to adopt for this investigation. It is imperative that scheduling of the work shifts be done by the section supervisor. What's my subject? The section supervisor. What's my garbage verb? Done. Good. This is right now, this is a passive sentence, so I want to say the section supervisor must. Basically, imperative, critical, crucial, essential, vital, must. Those all can be translated to must. We must have them. It is crucial that assessment of the control strategy be performed by the site manager. Who's my subject? The site manager. The site manager what? The site manager must. Must what? Must assess. Good. We change our noun into a verb, don't we? Assess the control strategy. Do I need be performed by? No. Because my real verb is now doing its job. We don't need the garbage verb anymore. We just said we don't like to start our sentences with it because it's clear, unclear, and a pronoun. But let me just say that we actually don't really like pronouns very much anywhere in our paper because pronouns often equal lazy writing. It's like a red flag that says, I don't want to bother to tell you what I'm talking about. Good luck guessing. Remember, rule number one is to be clear. We never want our reader to guess. And sometimes this happens. In fact, here's a reviewer comment. Line 12 on page 3 of your paper is an example of your ongoing problem using pronouns clearly. There are at least 3 different nouns it could refer to. You must make your pronoun references clear. Reject. This reviewer was so tired of decoding and guessing the double, triple meanings of the pronouns, he gave up. I was working last semester with one of the students in my writing lab on her paper. And we were working for, it must have been 2 hours. And it was painful. And the reason it was so painful is that every sentence, every sentence, had it, they, them, that, which, their in there. And I never knew what it was or who they were. Because there were several possibilities in the previous sentence of what it could refer to. And I remember we were on like page 10. And there was a sentence. And I said, here's it again. You always say it. What does it mean? She's also frustrated. Me too. And she says, oh, teacher, I told you what it was 4 pages ago, right here. Remember? I didn't remember. No one will remember 4 pages ago. You must use a pronoun. There's only one possible noun the pronoun could refer to, or we will rewrite our sentence, or we will take it out. We will find some solution for it. Let me give you an example here. The study design significantly affected the analysis of X. This indicates that Y can be modified based on C. What is my pronoun here? This, right? This is a pronoun. And I have to ask, this what? This study, this design, this affecting, this analysis, this X, or this whole sentence? You see, it's not clear to me what the author's talking about. Better, the study design significantly affected the analysis of X. This finding, this outcome, this phenomenon, dokai, indicates. Now I know that the author's talking about the previous sentence, the entire previous sentence. The author has clarified with their word what this is. In most previous studies, they do not consider the effect of X on Y. Now my student said, they obviously means the previous study, so why are you complaining? Why are we complaining? Well, They is clear here. However, because we hate pronouns so very, very, very much, if there is any possible way to remove the pronoun from the sentence and make that sentence shorter and clearer, we will be 3 times happy. Can we take the pronoun out of the sentence here and while making the sentence shorter? Yes. What if we cut out in? Most previous studies do not consider the effect of X on Y. Is the meaning the same? Yes. Is it shorter? It is. Is the ugly pronoun gone? It is. Are we happy? We are delighted. This is exactly the type of change we like to take out. Extra words, particularly when they're pronouns. In most recent studies, they measure X in 4 different ways. Help me, I could also say, most recent studies measure X in 4 different ways. Good. We're going to take a quick break because I learned a long time ago if people sit for an hour, they begin to sleep like babies. I don't want that to happen to you. So get up, get some coffee, come back happy and full of sunshine, and we will continue in 10 minutes, shall we, with the last hour of our time together. 10-minute break, and we're going to get into the number 1 writing error. I have a lot of examples here of redundancy and extra words and how we can cut those out of our papers. 10-minute break.